Welcome back to Worldview. Now, in just 2 short weeks, we will celebrate the 50th anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King's legendary I Have a Dream speech.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
President Barack Obama on that day will address a crowd of people from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial on the dream and race relations in the United States. Now, joining us on the program today is Earl Wilson, Jr. Now, he's the son of the legendary New York Post journalist and gossip columnist Earl Wilson, and he's fast becoming a legend in his own right. He has spent a considerable amount of time writing musicals. His first was the acclaimed and successful sex romp, the off-Broadway production, Let My People Come. And yes, it sounds as campy as it actually is. And lately, though, he's written a fantastic new musical called Yes. Now, this is about a time-bending encounter between the 2004 Barack Obama, about to address the Democratic National Convention in Boston, and the late Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Now, the latter has a number of incredible songs, one of which was performed by 800 singers on the steps of the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. Earl Wilson, Jr., welcome to Worldview.
Thank you so much.
Let's take a second to review part of a clip of the choir of 800 performers that sang that song. So tell me, what was it like to hear your song sung by a choir of that size?
Well, it was an incredible experience because it was the first time the song had actually been sung in public outside of a brief presentation we made to introduce the show that it comes from. And I don't know how many times people get to hear 800 singers, even though they're children, sing a song like that. And what was so spectacular was it was at the Jefferson Memorial on July 5th, facing Martin Luther King's memorial. So it was dedicated to him. It was very emotional for me, as you can imagine, and for these 800 kids from around the world to do this. It was very exciting.
So tell me, Earl, how did this show Yes come into being? What is the premise behind it?
Well, here's what's so interesting, and I don't know that many people would know this, but I've been writing songs all my life, and I know songwriters who, when we talk about this, have had a similar experience, and it's something we cannot explain. My guess is that there are probably plenty of creative artists who experience this also, but you get a vision of something or a sound in your head, and you can't get rid of it. You don't know where it comes from. I almost feel like I'm a radio sometimes, that I didn't actually create the thing, but it was sent to me somehow by somebody. On March 4th, 2011, I had a vision. I cannot explain how it got there, but I saw Barack Obama walking on stage at the 2004 Democratic National Convention, and I felt time stopped, and he was transported to another dimension of space and time where he met Dr. Martin Luther King. And Dr. King proceeded to tell him what was about to happen to him. And then he told him, in not so many words, "You are the one coming after me, but it's your choice, and I'm going to prepare you. And the way I'm going to prepare you is to make you feel what the whole African-American experience has been like, so that you get it, because you've only heard about it. You've not actually experienced it." So in essence, what this musical does is go back to slavery, when these people were dragged from their homes, put on ships, thrown into the hold of the ship all together with the pigs and the chickens, thinking they were going to be eaten. And that's actually the truth. They thought they were going to be used as food. So if you start from that perspective and you wind up at the presidency, it is quite a journey.
Well, yeah, it's a heck of a journey indeed, no matter who it is, let alone the USA's first African-American president. And, this is a man who at such a tender age, 5, lost all contact with his father. And I understand that's a very important theme in this new musical. And what I'd like to ask you in the context of yourself having a famous father, what it must have been like for Barack Obama to lose contact with his father and for you to grow up in the household in which you did.
Well, it's very similar, except that my mother and father were married for 50-odd years. They were happily married, but my father was a workaholic. As anybody who knows anything about journalism knows, that's pretty much what happens. He covered the show business and entertainment world 24 hours a day. There was never sleep. There was never rest. The phone would ring at all hours of the day and night, usually with celebrities at the other end, giving him some kind of exclusive story. And so it was compelling to him to make sure what he got was true. So he had to check that all night. And by the time the next day came around, he'd still be checking. So he was not, and he was also a very shy man, which I've always found amusing for somebody who managed to get all the gossip that he got. He was basically shy. He was an honest, shy guy from the Midwest who had Midwest values. So when I was growing up, I remember particularly being taken to places like the Copacabana and getting to see all the great show business acts of the day. My parents thought it was important that I receive that kind of education. So we would go, we'd be seated at a very prominent table, and everybody in the club would want to come to see my father because they wanted to get mentioned in his column. So people were surrounding our table, usually jumping over me, pushing me out of the way. So I got used to the idea that I wasn't there for any reason except I was sort of the son, I'm sort of a tag along. But while I was there, I was watching the shows, and I got an education in show business, the likes of which you would never get from anything else except watching the greatest people who ever perform actually doing it.
And it seems as though it did very well by you. Now, I'm fascinated because it's very clear your heritage and perspective is not one of an African American. I mean, that culture has produced so many amazing plays and musicals about racial struggles. Vinette Carroll's work comes to mind, Your Arm's Too Short to Box with God, and then Soki Shanga, she wrote for Colored Girls, which was recently made into a movie. And that genre that speaks so specifically, I have to ask, what qualifies you as essentially a white American male to write about a fictional encounter between two very high-profile black men?
Well, I have to say absolutely nothing. Well, however, I am a creative artist. I'm a songwriter, and I say to people, and that's what I believe I was channeled to do this. Now, I know that's a big-sounding word, and who would believe that? All I can say to you is that I started work on this on March 4th, 2011, and 1 month and 1 day later, I had 80% of it written, book, music, and lyrics. Now, there's no way I could have done that. I'm talented, but I'm no brilliant genius. But I had melodies coming to me, I had ideas coming to me morning, noon, and night, and I felt I'm obliged to sit down and write this up. I have no idea how I was ever going to get it produced. I'm not a famous producer, I don't have any money, but I felt I have to do this. So far, I've been very lucky in having a bunch of very talented people get behind me and continue to push the fact that we want to make this thing happen. So I feel it was a gift to me that I'm meant to give to everybody else. I really mean that.
Wow, yeah, indeed, and you've done an absolutely fabulous job from everything I've seen so far. We've been pleased to have today join us Earl Wilson, Jr. Now, he's the son of the legendary New York Post columnist Earl Wilson. He's written a wonderful new musical called Yes, and when we continue with part 2 of our interview with him, we're going to take a look at some of the earlier works of Earl and how those have impacted him along the way and led to this point where we are today with the soon-to-be-released Yes. You're watching Worldview with Dennis Campbell. Stay right here for part 2.
Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.